Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maite Bezerra. I am a principal analyst in software-defined vehicles at the Informatech Automotive Group, and I'll be moderating this fireside session today, which will explore vehicle data influx. So more specifically, today we will discuss how the increasing data influx from connected vehicles requires car makers to develop software-related strategies regarding harvesting and analytics, and also the opportunities and challenges ahead. To provide insights into this topic, I would like to welcome Gopi Sunila, who is a technology innovation leader that has been working for Ford for the past 27 years in several domains, including autonomous driving, ADAS, connected vehicles, and V2X. He has also significantly contributed to automotive tech with over 500 patents. So without further ado, hi Gopi, it's a pleasure to have you here. And it would be great if you could briefly introduce yourself and your area of research before we kick in.
Thank you, Maite, and thanks everyone for joining. It's a lovely opportunity to talk to you guys about the data, right? So, anyways, at Ford, I've been working in various researches, like Maite was pointing out. Currently, I'm engaged in connected vehicle research. So, in connected autonomy. Right, in vehicles communicating with each other and how to improve safety, autonomy, efficiency, and in working through that, and then that connectivity leads to a lot of data, and then also looking at how do we use that data for finding use cases, monetization of the data, or improving the overall ecosystem, right, the transportation ecosystem, where we can contribute through that data. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gopi. Perfect experience to discuss this topic. So let's dive in then. I think one point that we are seeing is that vehicles are gaining more and more sensors. And because of that, the amount of data being produced is increasing exponentially. So my question is, how can car makers leverage all this data that is being produced by connected cars?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, right? Actually, cars have become, right, the sensing system that we are adding is just proliferating. And the amount of data that's coming out is exponentially increasing, like you said. It's like, it's like, yeah, we add one or two sensors, but then we're adding functionalities over it that is significantly increasing the data. And that is actually driving a lot of complexity in terms of the data management. It's like a information overload. It's right, as people, we can't handle the information too. So it's the same thing with the vehicles. It's a lot of data coming in, and what are we going to do with that? I think then it is about moving from data to information. There is a lot of data, but what is the critical information that we need is the way we look at it. It's like we are, anytime we say if a camera is coming, we are identifying, hey, what are the targets that are on the road or whatever it is. But that is important. Even if you see all the different forms of the data, how do you translate that into the information that is useful, insightful information? And that's what we are focused on. And so that's what actually is the big part of the first work, where take all this data, make sense out of it, which is what they are getting the insights and the information. And then how do you use that information for various use cases, for either driving your vehicle or understanding the environment in which we operate in, and improving safety, whatever it is, right, for different use cases. Generating maps, or right, driving, learning the AI models, whatever it is. So that is taking that all that data, feeding into making into something useful information, and feed into these pipelines of use cases that we are thinking about. So I think we have to keep doing that, and it just gets more and more. At some point, when you have too much information, that is again looks like data again, right? It's too much information. It's like, you know what, that like it's what we call TMI, right? It's like that's what it's going to come down to. It's like, no, I don't need that detail. Just go down to a next level of information. So I think we need to keep getting more and more intelligent about what is data, what is information, and that's what point information is data, and then translate it to the next level of information. So I think it makes us smarter in how do we handle that. So, okay.
You made a very interesting point, which is making sense of all this data, this raw data. And I believe that a critical part of this is using AI, so AI models, AI algorithms. And having said that, we know that developing this kind of algorithms, it's often related to software skills, which are not traditionally linked to automakers. So I'm just wondering, how are car makers thinking on this challenge? And how are you feeling about partnering with big tech companies?
Yeah, that's the tech, right? Tech companies like Google's and Amazon's look like, hey, they and automotive companies are different areas. And that is totally not true now, right? It's like we were the guys who were generating the vehicles, working with, right? We were consuming fuel, and AWS and Microsoft, they were consuming data. That's what it was, right? They were creating and consuming data, and we were consuming the fuel. We needed to come together. And when we look at all the relationships that have developed in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, not even 10 years back, right? We used to say, it's like, hey, we are having this relationship with this automotive company 10 years back. Now our relationships are, hey, we are having a relationship with Microsoft, AWS, Google, and right, Ford has a very good Google Ford relationship. It's all because of some of these, like that Google thing was significantly from the data side of the equation where we are working with, because they are good with the data on how to handle. We are good with generating the data. That's what we are, right? Automotives generate it, but they don't know how to use it, how to efficiently use it. Google gets the data from customers, but also they do not generate any of the automotive kind of the data, and our data is they are the handlers of it in a much better way. And they have much better systems in terms of AI models, and it's right significantly because they have been working in that space. That is their expertise. So I think in a lot of places we can't even afford to develop all that capability. And by the time we develop it, we will be out of the market. So it is best to have those relationships, and that everyone is doing that, right? It's like, why is IBM significant, right? Watson coming in and the AI systems telling you, it's like, what you need to do or not. Those relationships and AWS systems in the car, right? Not just as a data partners, they are actually feature partners, right? When we talk in the car, ask a question, it could be the Amazon Alexa telling you the answer. It's not our cloud or any of that stuff. So it is significant, and that is a great enablers. These tech companies coming together is a big enablers. And at some point, maybe they are competitors too in some way, but at this point, they are enablers, really. So
that's very interesting, as you say. Yes, they are enablers. And very interesting, this relationship between the car maker generating the data and they helping you to analyze the data. So there are two topics I would like to explore this. I think the first one is everybody asks about it. So when you start working with these companies, what happens with data ownership and also data privacy? How do you handle this and how this could potentially affect the end consumer? Is it really a problem, or are you developing relationships in which data ownership is very well defined?
Yeah, I think that is right. It's a big, complex issue that we need trying to resolve. I think we are all fighting with this, like, hey, where is that privacy line? That keeps moving, actually, right? So, but I think the way we are approaching it is how do we take the data that provides, and it's used only to provide the convenience to the customer, to improve their safety, improve their efficiency of their vehicle, right, is the way to think about it. So those relationships are, the data contracts and data relationships are developed with the objective of providing something good back to the customer without encroaching on their privacy, right? A lot of the data, right, there is no exposure to the privacy of the data, right, which comes out anonymized, and it's only the exposure that comes out is how are people driving, not how somebody is driving, how are people driving, where are people driving, right, how often they are driving, how much they are driving, whatever, right? These are the kind of the things, right? How are they driving their vehicles in the lane or out of the lane, or is there near collisions? These are kind of the things that we are looking at rather than how somebody is driving, right? That's what we're not looking at mostly. So then take that information and see how do we improve that functionality for the customer. So it is just feeding them back, the benefits back to the customers. That's what we're looking at. I mean, and right, and there is, we'll keep asking more and more, right? It's like, oh, you know what, we need a little bit more of that information. We need a little bit more of that information. And I think that line is moving, right? From the customer, right? 20 years back, you ask a customer for their name, says, no, I'm not going to give my name, right? It's the way it would look at. And then it's like, yeah, and then they learn, right? Customers also learn that, you know what, giving some data has helped, gives benefits back to them. So they are moving that line to see what is acceptable to give the information and what's not. And some of the social media has helped out people to just get comfortable with actually sharing some information, right? Where they themselves are realizing what is shareable, what's not, what's effective, what's not. So the social media is actually helping them to say, it's like, I put my profile, I did such information in there, and that's public. It's like, okay, that was not bad, right? So that comfort line is moving, and that keeps happening. And that's one of the places I was talking about, was that what is acceptable or not acceptable is a moving line. It is not a set in stone yet, right? So we keep getting benefits. Then we put the guards around some information that is definitely not you're going to share, and then there are other information we are okay to share, right? Like people creating their own videos, like, hey, look at me, how I drove my vehicle, or how I performed, or whatever it is, and then putting on the YouTube or anywhere to share, right? So we are giving kind of a platform for people to demonstrate themselves. This is what is going to happen. So I think it is both give and take, and we need to have boundaries around some of the critical information that you should not share. But sharing as a holistically improving the benefits is where I think we are all going after, trying to just provide the benefit to the customer and take data only for that sake and not about marketing it for something else. And I know we have collisions with that, where you start using for other marketing and other purposes, but at least from automotive side, I'd say that's where we are focusing on, and providing benefit back to the customer. So.
That is fantastic. And as you say, as end consumers, we are getting more and more use. We are understanding that AI-based models require data. So if you want to have a better user experience, it has to access some data. And actually, having said that, to improve AI-based models, you need a large amount of training data. And if we think about how data it's being shared today within car makers, it's just that you can only access data from your own vehicle fleet, which is sent to your own cloud. So I was just wondering, do you think that this is the ideal model, or this will have to change so we can improve learning and improve the user experience in the future?
Yeah, I think I use, and then I use feedback to my system. I think that is okay till now. But as we move along, I think Don't expect that you will get all the data that you want. And if you want all the data you want from your own vehicles and other stuff, you're going to wait for a long time, because your vehicles are not going to face all the scenarios that you really want to look at. So we should be able to leverage other people's data. And I think that is possible, right? But there are issues with it, right? So in terms of how do I share the data, it's like, even if I want to share it, it's not easy to share it. It's like, I say, it's like, hey, I work on projects where it's like, we gave a set of data and it took 3 months to explain the data, right? Giving the data took about an hour, right? Transferred it. And then 3 months of engineering effort to explain and right, give the context to that data. I think that is where the huge cost of or barrier to data exchange is coming to, right? We can exchange data for the benefit of everyone, or even for monetization for whatever purpose, but still the big cost is about the inability to absorb that data easily. I think that's where one of the things I think as an industry we're all looking at is, yeah, we want to exchange the data, but we want to develop some standards so that exchange is not coming with a 1,000-page explanation of what the data is, so that we all understand what data is. And then you say, it's like, hey, yeah, here you go. And then we say, it's easy to interpret. There's no interpreter with every data point. So that is important for us. So I think AI models will get better when we get data from different sources, but we do need to make sure that we are able to exchange it efficiently, really.
Very good point. Do you think that in the future we will achieve a point where we have data standardization and car makers exchanging data between them to improve the general user experience, or is it too far-fetched?
No, it's not far-fetched, because everyone identified the problem. I think his first thing is to say, it's like, Houston, we have a problem here, right? That's the way we say. It's like, we identified the problem. It's like, then let's go get to fixing that. I think where we are a little bit tied up is, yep, it's a problem. We need to get standards. Yeah, who's going to do that? Okay, who is developing the standards for data exchange? That question mark is still there, right? We do not. So we are looking at, like, how do we do that? Is there which is that body that needs to standardize some of that? So in the transportation industry, I think the transportation are very motivated to standardize some of those things. And then we are looking at data. They are looking at data from automotive companies and other sources to come to the DOTs to improve the transportation systems themselves. And that's where they're actually saying, it's like, you talk to Ford, you talk to GMs, like, hey, give me the data in this format. And then they're setting some standards, right? How's the data exchange? So I think it'll come, right? I don't think everyone is going to develop the standards, but there are big users who might be like the DOTs who can force some of those standards in the beginning, and then that sets the ball rolling in terms of creating some of the standard methods. So we'll see. It'll happen because we all identified it as a problem, and we all identified the need for data, and we all identified we need to share data. So, okay.
Fantastic. That's great news. Quite optimistic, yes. I think another question I have then is thinking about making sense of the data and using this data for developing use cases or taking action to this data. But this data is generated in the car. And even though there are some pre-analyzing tools in the car, the data has to be transferred to the cloud. And I think the main question that some are asking now is, who pays for it? So how are car makers planning to monetize connected vehicle data and connected vehicle services?
Yeah, I think the data, right, when you're providing to somebody, they should provide enough benefit for them to monetize it, right? And I think the automotive companies could potentially be monetizing that data by giving that data to DOTs or to insurance companies or whatever it is, right? To say it's like, for their actuarial analysis or whatever. That's going on, really, right? I think the biggest barrier we are seeing in terms of the monetizing the data is data looks very expensive now, right? And the reason is it's not because of the hour I spent on sending you the data, it's the 3 months I spent explaining to you is the one that's cost you, right? So those are the, so in the monetization models, then there is this big expenses that are happening. And once that comes down, so I think there will be monetization of the data. There has to be. You need to give some motivation for somebody working to exchange the data with other people, right? Even if it is non-privacy data, but it is motivation for them to create business models that work. So that's the reason for monetization of the data. And I think at this point, monetization is valued. We want to do that. All the industry wants to monetize the data, but I think the cost of the data is significant because of the just cost of exchange is higher than the cost of the data. So then that's where we need to look for efficient ways to exchange the data in there. So that's what I think we are all recognizing that, and we are trying to find ways to do that. And you saw that. I mean, the data is so important, and monetization is important, and the exchange is important. Almost all the OEMs have huge organizations whose sole purpose is to work with the data, right? Managing the data, monetizing the data, trying to find business models to use of the data, right? So take GM, Ford, whoever, right? Everyone is having big engineering groups working on that. So that means we will find efficient ways to do these things, right? It's not a small section of 4 or 5 people working on it. It's hundreds of people dedicated to this kind of thing. So it'll happen. It'll happen in a very efficient way at some point, and find business models, right? There is primary business model. I mean, we looked at it as like primary and secondary and tertiary business models that happen, right? Somebody who directly uses the data, or somebody who uses the data to get insights, and that somebody else uses that for, right? Like we provide multiple information, and then insurance uses it, and insurance translates that down to some third level tertiary users of the data. So there is some huge multiplication effect as it happens to primary, secondary, tertiary use cases that come out of it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's very interesting to understand the costs that are behind not only the data transfer, but as you're saying, understanding it. But I think another part that I would like to explore is when we think about business models is the value that you are delivering for the end consumer. So I was wondering if you can talk about how car makers can use all this data being generated, all this input that they can gather from these connected vehicles to develop new use cases, either safety related or convenience use cases that can actually improve the user experience. So can you give us some examples of them?
Yeah, I'm sure. Right. Some use cases where other people are using our data, I'll give both ways example. One example is like, hey, we are like our vehicles are driving on the road, and see, it's like, yeah, my vehicle maintains the lane by looking at the lanes. It's like, I can read the lane. Okay. It's like, then I'm able to use that information to keep my vehicle. And wherever I cannot see the lanes, it's like, I'll put a mark on it. It's like, I couldn't see the lane here, I couldn't see the lane here. and tell the transportation companies or the DOTs, like, hey, these are all the places I can't see the lanes, right? It's the way to tell that information. It's like, things I want to see, I can't see. So this is where I can't see. So this is information for you. It's a problem for me, is information for you. That's how it turned out, right? And then the other cases is like, hey, it's like, I'm driving. It's like, oh, damn, my vehicle slipped here, or I had to do a hard braking here. It's like, bam, bam, bam. Use that information, and then you're communicating to other people, right? Collect all that information and saying, hey, there is a bad spot of road here that you might want to be careful, right? So there are a lot of the road hazard warnings and other warning features that are coming up, right? So where each one, their experience, they're sharing with other people, and then so that our use case is that we are warning our drivers to use other people's information, or we are giving information into it for having better use cases. So that is right in terms of the shared information across all OEMs. For ourselves, we are using that information for training our own models in terms of, we say it's like, in terms of the use cases is learning about vulnerable road users, or how the vehicles are interacting, then making the use cases in terms of improving our, say, for example, our Blue Cruise and other things, right? We are using our own data to go from just as a lane keep assist, and then we improved our use cases to a Blue Cruise to probably level 3 autonomy, whatever, right? We use our own data or other people's data to develop the use cases of autonomy or collision avoidance kind of features as we move along. So that's the places where we are using our data for ourselves, and also, like I showed you, like I told you, how the use cases for other people to use our data, like DOTs, or other vehicles to use from experiences of other vehicles. So it's and I think that is just as a starting point. I mean, we are all thinking, it's like, how can I use data? How can this guy use the data? This is all primary use cases. I think once we open up the data exchange in an easier manner, right? If somebody can get the data at a low cost and very easy in terms of efficient way to transfer the data, that's what will start the innovation, right? Then you can have a lot of the startups start thinking about how they can use the data, right? Right now, not all the small companies don't have access to the data at a cheap cost or anything, or an efficient way. The data analytics will really open up startup companies to think of various use cases, right? We haven't scratched anything yet. That happens only when we are able to allow other people to get the insights, to analyze the data, and then see how they can, right? I mean, so many startups are coming, but it's only still a start.
That's true. So many use cases. Well, thank you so much. Yes, that has been a really great chat. Really good insights on how we can improve the final user experience through using the data, and also what's the impact that it's having on car makers. So now I would like to open the session to the audience so we can address their questions. I already see a few here in the chat, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to tap them in the Q&A box. So I will start with the first question by Alex Leonov. So he's asking if you expect telcos to start offering unlimited data plans to automotive OEMs.
Oh, yeah. See, I think my thinking is like, it's, do you have unlimited data on your phone? Yes. Okay. I expect that to happen in the OEMs. Definitely sometime, right? So it's only, right, they can hold off giving this piecemeal of data. Oh, I'll give you 1G, 2G for a certain time. And as the use cases are proliferating, there's no way you can negotiate this 5G, 5K or 5 meg or 5 gig kind of data, right? It has to get down to unlimited data. The one thing that I tell is there's a lot of the use cases we think about and says like, oh, we are worried about the data, and then we pull back. It's like, when that's happening, there's a time where it's like, okay, you know what, take that barrier out, take it out completely so that we can really provide the experiences. So totally expect that to happen, right? I believe that because, so when I always tell this story to people, when I came to this country about 30 years back, so I used to pay $1.50 to call India for 1 minute. Now it's a free call, right? That's how it translates to. You pay for the data, at some point you don't pay for the data. You just pay for a service and be done. Okay, so that's what it's going to be.
That's a good point, yes. As soon as more people use it, then it's likely that it's going to get cheaper. We have a next question then. Okay, so this is from Jeff Newman, and he wants to know how other companies can address Ford to initiate potential partnership conversations.
So, this is right. It's like, hey, whose door I need to knock on to get this partnership with Ford on the data? It's like, so, right, we have business entities who are working with some of the major players in the data in terms of like, hey, what are the kind of data monetizing solutions we have? And a lot of times, Ford or others are working with other data aggregators to see, it's like, there are data aggregators whose sole job is to get the data and see how we can, and then we providing some data into those kind of solutions. And then looking at data for, say, we're looking at some of the DOTs and other people who can use the data directly from us, and then looking at those kind of relations. But think of that. You are looking for somebody who can take a major pipeline of the data. So if somebody, smaller companies or individual companies want to come to the data, that is, right, with Ford, also, you need to knock and convince somebody to have that relationship with you. At this point, that's where we are. But I think we are looking at ways, right, from industry perspective itself, we have to look at ways to be able to just go to the data market and buy it. I was telling people, it's like, data has to change from something like investing in a company. I take this example because it relates very well. I want to buy a share of your company, then I need to work with your company for 2-3 months to develop a contract. That's how it was, right? Years back. Now I go to E-Trade, buy a stock. That's it. In 0 seconds, literally, right? That's how the data exchange should be. Data is the new money. So we should come to that point for developing those easy relationships. We are looking at that in how we can make it as a data marketplace for company, for the Ford company itself. How could it be kind of a subscribed kind of a models? We are looking at some potentials for some of the use cases, at least, to be able to people do that. But as an industry, we do need to do that where they can just go to a data marketplace, right? There is the E-Trade or the data trade market, and then you buy the data. What do you want? You pick it up and then take it. That's how it should be. Hopefully it will come there. And we need players like Google's and AWS's to be part of that equation, because they are the drivers who can make things happen like that in terms of the marketplace for the data. So, hope I answered the question.
Well, I believe so. And yes, I find this marketplace data very interesting. So you can actually give opportunities, as you say, to smaller companies to be part of it as well. The next question we have is from Mark from Techio. He's asking, approximately what percentage of data generated by a vehicle is useful enough to be usable and monetized? Tricky one.
Yeah. Well, so when the amount of data that is generated inside the vehicle, let me say that, right? versus what is the data that we send out itself is probably 0.01%. Right? The number of parameters of the data that comes in the vehicle is huge, and the data that we send out to the cloud is 0.01%. And just saying that's real, actually, right? We have 1 million parameters or 10 million parameters, we might be sending 1,000 parameters up. And then out of that data, that is going to be useful for monetization. I think that depends how we monetize that. But if you send 1,000 parameters, if I looked at one of the use cases that I worked on, the parameters that I needed from that 1,000 parameters were about 8 or 10, right? So even if you say 10 parameters, that's 1/100th of it is of the data that you send out. So it's a 0.0001% is probably the data that actually translates into some monetizing value. So there is billions and billions of gigs of data that could be created, and then the real information in the end, it probably translates into in gigs. Right. So that, it is a lot of data. That's what. So you do need to understand how do you filter this down. There's no way you're going to take that 100% data and pipeline it in. So yeah, but even that is absolutely great value, right? That 0.00001% of the data that we generate used for something meaningful is significant value.
Very interesting statistics. I didn't have this perspective. Very important.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it in terms of just the parameters that we generate, right? The number of parameters that are in the vehicle, right? And then really, that's what is the information I talk about, right? Yeah, you squeeze that down, and this is the key information we sent out, and then that translates to a very small amount of key information that really goes out.
Very interesting. Thank you. Well, next question we have here is from Ritesh Kulkarni. The pipeline of data will dry up without customer consent or continued subscription of connected vehicles. How are you working on both these topics?
I think we were worried about that for a long time, and data keeps increasing, right? That's what it's going to be, right? I think what you're doing is you're finding use cases, you're finding various ways, multitude data sources that are coming on the vehicles, and then we are finding various uses of that data. So literally at some point, even if I say it's like, I don't want to share any of my information, I don't want to do anything, it gets difficult to even operate in some of the cases, right? I do that sometimes, like I'm not going to give my location data to Google to tell me my directions. And then it says, okay, where are you now? I have to enter my direction, my location. So then again, so it gets down to these conveniences and the benefit that the customer itself receiving, enabling them to provide the information, that sharing some of that information, right? I mean, it is very important that they don't give privacy information, but there is other information that might be useful for them. And then this subscription and other part, yeah, you make it very expensive to subscribe, you make them pay for the data and other stuff, that makes it very difficult. One of the things that people worry about is like, I'm not going to share the data, and why am I using my data cost to send you my data, right? Well, that's what, like I answered the question before. I think it's all about making the unlimited part of it. That should be just a data, the cost of the data in terms of the telecom cost should be just a fixed cost. Everyone gets they pay $20 per month and get their unlimited data. And then how do you use it is what is going to be different. So I think I'm less worried about the dry up, because every time I'm thinking of a potential dry up of the data is overloading. I'm just wondering how to drink that right now. It's drinking from the fire hose right now. I'm not worried about actually the fire hose drying up yet. So.
Fantastic. Very good point. Okay, we have a last question then. This is from Another question from Ritesh Kulkarni. He wants to know, this is similar to the first question, which is what is the percentage of data collected that is actually analyzed and used for business insights? But then the follow-up question, which I think is interesting to address, is how do you increase the value generation from all the data that is collected?
Yeah, I think the first part, I answered that question in the sense like, a very, very small amount, right? 0.0001% of the data that we generated on the vehicle, and maybe 0.01% of the data that we send it out to the clouds to save is what we might use for a use cases. But in terms of how do we increase that value generation from all the data collected, I think, like I mentioned before, I think we need to make the data exchange a low cost and easily accessible for anyone who wants to access the data for their business. That's how the people can create a lot of the businesses out of it, right? A lot of the use cases. There's no way I can sit here from automotive side and think of all the use cases that are, right? We are limited by our thinking, but we have to use the whole society, the whole community looking at the problems, what they are facing, and then they coming up with solutions using some of this data is the way to think about it. I'm a big proponent of that ability for people to have the information they need to create the businesses. And in this modern world, I think the data is one of the important things that people need to identify business opportunities and create businesses. That's why you see so many of the startup companies and other stuff. A lot of them are either generating the data or using the data to generate other data. That's what they're doing. A lot of the startup software companies are into that. So, okay.
Fantastic. Gopi, thank you so much. Wow, we finished just on time. So I would like to thank you very much for your extremely valuable insights. It's very interesting to understand how data is being used by car makers, all the opportunities and the challenges that we still have to overcome. So thank you so much for this discussion. I would also like to thank the audience for joining our discussion as well. And thanking you for attending the Auto Talk Digital Economy, and asking you to keep an eye for future events on our website.
Thank you, Maite, and thank you, everyone, for your time. Hopefully it was worth it to see some of the insights. Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.